In this video, we'll look at the basics of Java primitives. Hey, Code Operative here, helping you reach further faster in the programming world. If this is our first time meeting, welcome to the channel. The Code Operative channel is for developers of any level. This is a resource that will help you be confident in your skills and solutions. If that sounds appealing to you, hit the subscribe button, the bell, and keep watching to build those programming muscles every day. All right, let's get started looking at variables. So what is a variable? Well, you can think of it like giving a name to a space in memory. Okay, it's a nickname for something that you define. So let's do an example. So let's write int number of wheels equals 4. Okay. So int is the keyword that you use when defining a variable as an integer, which is a number that is fairly large. It's -2 to the 31 to 2 to the 31 minus 1. So really huge number range that it can hold. So this is your main wheelhouse when you're dealing with whole numbers. So you can't put 4.5 in an integer, but you can put 4. So we have a number of wheels, 4. Okay. Say that we're adding a trailer, so let's do number of trailer wheels. And the trailer has 6 wheels. Okay, so we've defined 2 integers here. We have number of wheels and number of trailer wheels. So these are both referring to something, right? So you're giving a nickname to these memory spaces. So this first one is referring to, I don't know, your car. This is the number of wheels on your car. And this second one is the number of trailer wheels. So let's just print these out so you can see what they are. We'll say number of wheels So what we're saying here is we're going to print out the phrase number of wheels, and then afterwards we're going to call the variable that we have here number of wheels, and we're going to put whatever value is in there into this sentence that we're printing to the console. Okay, so let's also print out the number of trailer wheels. Alright, so now when I run this, it should say number of wheels 4 and number of trailer wheels 6. So let's see. What does it say? Number of wheels 4, number of trailer wheels 6. Great. So now we're going to hitch the trailer onto our car. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say number of wheels now is going to equal number of wheels plus number of trailer wheels. And then print out number of combined wheels which is just passing in the number of wheels variable again. So if we run this, we should have the first two things the same, and the last thing should say number of combined wheels 10, which it does. So why does it do that? Well, we have our number of wheels variable. So this, remember, this is just a nickname for a memory area, right? We're saying set this memory area equal to itself plus whatever's in this memory area, which happens to be 6. So we're saying, let's write this as a comment. So when you add this double slash in front of what you're writing, you're basically saying to the compiler, hey, ignore this line. This is just for developers. So this is going to be number of wheels equals 4 plus 6, right? Which should equal 10, which it does. Great. So whenever you're assigning a variable, right, the variable you're assigning goes on the left. This is what you're setting. Left is what you're setting. Right is what you're setting it to. And then, of course, you always end the line with a semicolon. So that's integers. You can do a number of things with those. You can say number of wheels equals number of wheels times 2. Okay, so now we're just multiplying the number by 2. So if we run this again, now it should be 20 wheels instead of 10 wheels, right? Because here it gets set to 10. So now it's saying number of wheels equals itself times 2. So 10 times 2. And you can do a number of operations like this. And a convenient way of shortening this, you can say plus equals number of trailer wheels. So now if I comment this out, it should say the same thing. Because this plus equals is saying, okay, add this to yourself. And in the same way, I can do it to this line as well. I can say number of wheels times equals 2. So if I run this, it should give me the same exact numbers. Okay? Great. So that's integers. Integers are your standard numbers. So typically when you write integers, well, write any variable really, you want to define those at the top of your methods. Okay? So if I add another variable here, which is number of vehicles, right? So we're defining this at the top. And you don't have to set it right at the beginning. I could set this, all the way at the end. I could say number of vehicles equals 1. And then I'll just print this out. So number of vehicles So even though I didn't set it up here, since I set it down here, I can call it just fine. But if I try and call it up here before I've set it, it's going to yell at me. It's going to say, hey, this hasn't been initialized. So that's a problem. So always make sure your variables are initialized before you try and use them. Alright, so that's all about integers. There's a number of different variable types. So we can say a string right, and then I can print out this string just like that. So the string is holding this sentence here. So now if I print this out, if I run this compiler, it prints out the string just fine. So you can also do operations to the string. Say then I add this little piece to it. Now it'll add this piece to the end of that string. So now it's all one big string using the plus equal operator. Because the plus for a string means to basically join them together. So there's that. And then there are other data types. So say we want to, so I've got a float here. Say I've got $20.50. So a float is a number that allows you to store decimal points. It's a floating point number is what it's called. So if I just print out money, it should print out 2050. Yeah, 20.5. So now if I do money plus equals 5, now it's going to say 25.5. So this is what you would use if you're dealing with decimal numbers, smaller decimal numbers. Most people use a double because it's slightly larger. It's a double precision, so difference between 32 bits and 64 bits. So say that the bank is worth some amount of money, and you can see that it holds a large amount of money. It doesn't always translate it to that notation, so if I make it slightly smaller, it should print it out normally. Yeah. It changes to scientific notation when the numbers get large. So Boolean, that's another type. You can also, so let's give you a Boolean. So Boolean is something like door is open equals true, right? So I'll say door is open. Door is open. So that should print out true. Door is open, true, right? So a Boolean is either a true or false. So that's that data type. It's one of the simplest data types, and then you can also have Char, which is short for character. So character, my first letter, C. Right, so characters are interesting because they can reference a single letter. So if I say something like, my letter is, and then my first letter, it should say my letter is C. Right, you'll notice I use the single quotes here. This is to indicate that I'm going to be dealing with a single character. If I try and put other stuff in here, it's going to yell at me. Too many characters in character literal. So an interesting thing you can do with a character is stick it into an integer, because this is all based off of the ASCII table. So if I put int number conversion, so I'm just going to call this number conversion, and I'm going to put my first letter into number conversion. So now if I print out number conversion, and there's other ways you can do this. You can see it prints out 67. So, and that's because it's based on this little thing called the ASCII table. So if I bring up the ASCII table here, you can see that decimal number 67 refers to capital C, right? So decimal 67C. And that's that character. It's interesting. So if I add 1 to this, right, and then set my first letter equal to number conversion, changing an integer back to a character, but you can just tell it this is a character, and then it will believe you. So I've added 1 to it, and now it's D, which makes sense, right? D is after C. So just a cool little trick there. You can manipulate characters like that. So there's a few other data types. So there's a long, which is basically a big integer. So long equals, right. So this is for big integers. And then you have a byte, which is a really small integer. It goes from -128 to 127. So if I try and set this to 128, it's going to yell at me. If I set it to 127, it's fine. And then there's a short, which is a slightly bigger than byte integer, so it's a less small int. So this one goes from -32,768 to 32,767. So 32,767. That's what I can set it to at a max. If I set it to this, it's going to yell at me. So these just save you a little bit of data. when you're... It saves you a little bit of memory when you're manipulating stuff like this. So those are all of the basic data types, and I hope that's been helpful. All right, you just learned about variables in Java. Question of the day: what's the craziest name you've ever used in a variable? Let me know in the comments below.